Roland summoned one of his trusted guards waiting outside the door and instructed him to retrieve a prisoner from the cell and also bring Carter along. The testing grounds had been set up outside the city walls. As a precautionary measure, Roland called upon 4 squads of elite soldiers from the First Army, positioning them in a circle surrounding the testing grounds, armed and on high alert. The test subject was a death row inmate charged with robbery and murder. He straightforwardly informed the prisoner that if he sacrificed himself for the test, his family would receive a reward of 5 gold royals. After a moment of hesitation, the inmate agreed to the condition. After swallowing 2 pills, the expression on the prisoner's face quickly transformed. Veins bulged on his forehead and arms, his skin turned a deep red, and his breath became rapid. He seized a wooden sword and charged fiercely towards Carter, who stood there calmly, waiting. His speed was akin to that of a sprinting wolf, leaving small craters in the ground with each step. The opponent was nothing more than a murderer, lacking any formal combat training apart from his inherent ferocity. Yet, he was able to hold his ground against Roland's chief knight. Roland gazed at the 2 figures in the distance, realizing that the church had not lied. If this drug were to be used by well-trained knights, their fighting prowess would be unimaginable. A deep gash was slashed across his side, blood flowing freely from the wound. Such an injury would significantly hinder the movement of half his body, but he appeared unfazed. He turned around and lunged at the knight once again. Carter employed the same tactic, delivering a powerful impact that made the criminal stumble back 2 steps. The wooden sword also snapped in response to the forceful blow. Carter threw another wooden sword at him, but the criminal did not catch it. Instead, he looked up at the high wall. As Roland locked eyes with him, in the blink of an eye, his speed reached an unimaginable level, akin to a galloping wild horse, charging toward Roland. Carter shouted for the soldiers to shoot the criminal, and at that moment, the other soldiers had already pulled the trigger. Blood spattered from the criminal's back, yet his speed remained unabated as he swiftly broke through the encirclement. The criminal leaped into the air, effortlessly scaling the several-meter-high wall. Just as he was about to strike Roland, a woman appeared before him, holding a green flame in her hand. Immediately after, another woman in white emerged, wielding a gleaming silver dagger, slashing at him. The injured soldiers were swiftly healed by Manhwa's abilities. They were already familiar with the power of the pills. The black pills had equally astonishing effects. Even a severe slash that nearly severed their ribs or a close-range strike couldn't halt their movements. If it were an ordinary person, they would have long lost their combat effectiveness due to the pain. What troubled them, even more, was the fact that the church was willing to offer such substances. Had they not considered the possibility of the new king using the pills against them once Grey Castle was unified? Unless, they held even stronger cards in their hands and simply didn't care about such an eventuality. Roland sighed as he contemplated the situation. He had initially planned to resolve the town's issues of population and insufficient funds by attacking the Changa stronghold. His focus would then shift to education, production, and agriculture, aiming to transform the border town into a city within a short period of time. As for weapon research, he had intended to set it aside temporarily. However, it now seemed apparent that military development couldn't be neglected either. Flintlocks still needed to be produced, and the research of new weapons, such as the breech loader and cartridges, should be prioritized on the agenda as soon as possible. After careful consideration, Roland concluded that the danger posed by mercury fulminate was too significant. Instead, he decided to invest in recruiting a group of alchemists. He would establish a laboratory in a corner of the town and allow them to explore and experiment on their own. After dinner, Roland called Anna and Scroll into his office. Every night, he set aside some time for teaching sessions. Suddenly, Roland heard a faint sound of breathing. Nightingale had unknowingly fallen asleep on the sofa, perhaps finding the lessons akin to a lullaby. The mist that veiled her mind dissipated, exposing her less than graceful sleeping position in front of the 3 of them. The prince couldn't help but shake his head with a mix of amusement and exasperation, deciding to conclude today's lesson. He gently removed his coat and draped it over her, extinguished the candle, and closed the door along with Anna and Scroll. Upon returning to her room, Anna tossed a cluster of green flames into a large wooden tub filled with water. Soon, steam rose from the surface, indicating its heat. She undressed and stepped into the tub. When the witches wanted to cleanse their bodies, they would seek Anna's help to heat the water. After all, fetching hot water from the kitchen was quite troublesome. The revelation seemed to astonish His Highness, as if he found it difficult to accept the practice of reusing bathwater. At this thought, Anna couldn't help but find it amusing. For a normal resident, it was a luxury to bathe once a month, so the practice of reusing water multiple times was nothing out of the ordinary. Anna reminisced about today's lesson. Roland had mentioned that the world is composed of countless tiny spheres, so minuscule that they need to be magnified millions of times to be visible to the naked eye. Raising her right hand, the ethereal flames of magical energy glowed like a cluster of fireflies, motionless at her fingertips. Suddenly, a thought struck her. If everything was composed of these tiny spheres, could she make herself as small and spherical as they were? Anna closed her eyes, envisioning herself as a conglomeration of countless particles. The flames began to undergo a transformation. The next morning, Roland was still in a blissful dream, driving tanks, and aircraft carriers, and Gundam. Nightingale excitedly called out to Roland, her face beaming with joy. She exclaimed that Anna's abilities had undergone another transformation, unlike anything she had ever witnessed before. Anna's magical form was astonishingly solid, almost like a physical entity. Roland quickly washed his face and dressed before following Nightingale upstairs to the second floor and entering the office, where the attention of the 11 witches immediately shifted towards him. In the morning, as Nightingale passed through Anna's room, she noticed Anna sleeping with her head resting on the desk. Upon closer inspection, Nightingale realized that the magic within Anna had taken on a fixed shape, resembling a continuously rotating cube. Anna recounted her experience to the other witches, explaining the concept of the small spheres, vibrations, connections, and the changes in her abilities. However, they still appeared perplexed, unable to grasp the connection between these elements. Anna had successfully reshaped the form of her flames, allowing them to coil and converge according to her will. With this newfound ability, Anna attempted to slice through an iron ingot, utilizing the formula S equals pi r squared to cut out a perfect iron circle. Roland asked to see Anna's new ability. Anna extended her finger, and a mass of black flames materialized out of thin air at her fingertip. It appeared similar in shape to ordinary flames, except for the fact that it lacked any luminosity. Anna was able to alter its shapes, from a cube to a blanket, to strings even thinner than a human hair. Roland couldn't help but marvel at Anna's brilliance. Apart from calling her a genius, he couldn't think of a more fitting description. The fact that she could immediately comprehend and apply new knowledge to her abilities after learning it that same night showcased her exceptional thinking and absorption abilities, which only highly gifted individuals possessed. Anna's transformation also sparked his interest in delving deeper into the essence of this world, eager to explore its true nature. Roland made the decision to appoint Scroll as the teacher and initiate the teaching sessions for the Witch Alliance. Later that afternoon, Roland gave the surrendered knights from the Changji stronghold a chance to redeem themselves. Some of them were assigned as farmers, while some were assigned to breed animals. The knight brought into the reception hall was tall and impressive, exuding remarkable handsomeness at first glance. This is Ferlin Eltek, the captain of the Lionheart Knight Order. Also known as the Dawnbreaker, the foremost knight of the Western Realm. Ferlin knelt on one knee and showed the utmost respect and congratulated Roland on taking over the Changji stronghold. Ferlin is the chief knight for Duke Ryan. His wife, Eileen, was originally a commoner working in the theater. They met and fell in love, however. Ferlin family did not support the marriage. As a result, Ferlin moved out to a small farm and married Eileen shortly after. Eileen finally got her first opportunity for a formal performance in the theater. Unexpectedly, the Duke watched the play and took an interest in her. Soon after, while Ferlin was away on a mission, he broke into the house and assaulted Eileen. Ever since, Ferlin had always waited for the chance to kill Duke Ryan. Soon, his left scapula felt the pinch of Nightingale's fingers. Indicating that Ferlin was telling the truth, Furland is a well-educated knight. Rather than sending him to the mines, Roland appointed him as a teacher in the border town. Furland bowed and presented a treasure map, hoping to ask Roland to spare his old subordinate Halon, who's 50 years old and illiterate. In the center of the map, there is an equilateral triangle, and the 3 acute angles connect 3 locations. One point falls at the end of the northern slope of the mountain, while another point is located within the enchanted forest, marked by a hexagonal star, presumably indicating the hidden treasure location. However, Roland's attention was completely drawn to the vertex of the triangle. It is located within the savage wasteland and represented by a jagged mountain peak, with the word Takura written on it. Roland called scroll over. The contents of the treasure map align with the miscellaneous notes recorded in ancient texts, which can be seen as indirect evidence of the church's construction of a city deep within the savage wasteland to run from demons. Maybe they could find some evidence there. Scroll's voice began to shake. She doesn't know why is the church trying to hide this history, and why does the church hunt witches as if they were demons? The hexagon star indicated on the map is only 50 kilometers from border town. Lightning can arrive there within 1 day, hopefully to scout some important info. Ever since Roland's plan to start providing the Witch Alliance education, Soroya has been tirelessly printing out worksheets and textbooks. Before Roland let Scroll go, he had something to give her. Roland opened a drawer, and immediately Nightingale started to stutter. It was full of snacks. Roland quickly closed it and opened another drawer. This time he handed over a small box. When Scroll opened it, it was a pair of glasses. Even knowing Scroll doesn't have vision problems, this is purely for aesthetics. Arriving at the mine on the northern slope, he picked up a steel pipe and examined it. The pipe was perfectly round with a smooth surface, and there were no visible pores or imperfections. In the center, there was a circular hole that was as smooth as the outer surface. When he aligned it with the sunlight, he could see a linear highlight along the surface. By using the high-temperature magical lines to cut objects, while maintaining precise control, Anna was capable of single-handedly elevating the town's industrial products to a new level. They did a series of tests to find out the maximum range for Anna's ability. Nightingale said it was 10 steps, while Anna said it was 15 steps. Roland quickly figured out they are both correct, but because of their height differences, they gave different measurements. Roland knew the next step is to have a standard measurement unit. In the Green Water Port, the influx of resources and population from Eagle City greatly strengthened the power of this harbor city. The raiders reaped abundant rewards, and the slave market became lively as well. The Black Sail Fleet, after a series of battles, not only suffered minimal losses but also acquired a large number of slaves to serve as sailors. They were currently undergoing intense training at the harbor. In a few days, they would set sail for the straight route, starting their first raid of the year. Now that Timothy had suffered a major defeat, there was no one left in the Grey Keep Kingdom who could stop Garcia. Given time, Garcia Wimbledon would undoubtedly become the ruler of the Grey Castle. Soon, the chiefs of the Sandstone clan and the Blackbone clan arrived. The chief of the Sandstone clan is a petite woman, while the chief of the Blackbone clan is tall and rugged, with scars covering his face and muscular arms. They both kneeled before Garcia and respectfully spoke. After the last battle, many of our warriors have been experiencing weakness and fatigue. Only by regularly taking the new pills can we find relief. However, our supply of pills is running low. We have come here to request that you provide us with more of these pills. Garcia declined the request and simply told them to wait. The two chiefs wanted to know when will they be receiving new supplies, and Garcia's chief knight yelled at the guard to take the two chiefs away while telling them to prepare either Gold Royal or Dark Water as department. After closing the doors to the terrace room, Garcia let out a soft sigh. She wasn't concerned about the Sand People or the church's pill because she had already threatened the nearby priests. If they didn't provide her with the supplies, she would hang their heads on the bow of her ship. Garcia's headache came from a letter she received, intelligence sent by her spies in another country. The report stated that the church, using the pretext of Queen Lina's hidden identity as a witch, had taken over the capital and seized control of the entire country. As he pushed open the heavy wooden door of the private chamber, a subtle scent of lavender greeted him. Bishop Malin had a fondness for candles infused with herbs and spices, particularly in enclosed spaces without windows. The fragrance it emitted brought him a sense of calm and tranquility. Aside from the nobility in the capital, there is little resistance from the rest of the kingdom. In fact, the common folk even welcomed the church's takeover. Only a few stubborn and deluded nobles cling to the past glory, but they will be dealt with accordingly. Heather suggests that all the nobility be eradicated. Heather, born in poverty, endured hunger and homelessness before being taken in by the church. With her innate sharp mind and exceptional judgment, she has risen to her current position. Maine understands her disdain for the nobility very well. He ignored Heather and continued his speech, questioning the status in the Grey Castle. Taylor said, according to the intelligence, the new king, Timothy, did not return to the capital after his defeat. Instead, he went directly to the Eastern Territory. Maine proposed to cut the supplies of pills by 30% to Garcia. This way it balances the two-party. This way, within 2 years, there won't be any soldiers left in the Grey Castle. Taylor nodded, agreeing on the plan, then said there were some issues in the Changji stronghold. After defeating Duke Ryan, Roland returned to the border town but did not respond to the church's invite. The three wondered what kind of person Roland truly was, whether it was wrong to choose Roland. "Well, what do you think?" Mean looked at Heather. Heather shrugged and replied, "How else can we see it? What were the initial rumors about him? Incompetent, bad-tempered, greedy, and lacking in skills. I don't think someone like that could possibly capture the Changgu fortress, right? So the answer is simple: he deceived everyone, whether they were nobles or us." "Are you suggesting?" Maine furrowed her brow. Defeating a duke indeed proves his exceptional abilities, but even if someone is exceptionally talented, it is meaningless without sufficient resources to utilize. Taylor shook his head. Since he chose to return to that desolate place, it means he has given up any possibility of meddling in Grey Castle's affairs and naturally poses no threat to our plans. That's true in theory. However, when combined with this piece of information, it becomes quite interesting. Heather lifted her shirt and tossed out a small piece of paper. "My personal intelligence." Maine spread out the paper and quickly scanned its contents. "Which alliance?" Returning to Bordertown, Roland had implemented a policy that offered serfs the opportunity to attain freedom by engaging in farming. However, Berev couldn't help but question why Roland was only demanding a mere 20% in taxes. In Berev's opinion, even a 50% tax seemed insufficient. Roland, on the other hand, clarified that accumulating stockpiles of gold in the basement served no purpose. Instead, he proposed levying a 20% tax, and he will then purchase the remaining crops at market price. This approach would ensure that the castle received an adequate food supply while compensating the serfs. Once they had saved enough, they could begin purchasing items exclusively available in the border town. Ultimately, the money would flow back to Roland, leading to an improvement in living standards. Shortly thereafter, Carter and Shane returned as Roland had requested. Shane headed to the Green Water Port to procure the seeds and plants. When Shane returned, he proudly presented a variety of items. First, he showcased what he referred to as pearl rice. A unique and high-quality grain. Roland knew this was a corn. Additionally, he brought back 2 ground eggs, known for their distinct flavors. This was potatoes. Lastly, he presented sugar sticks, a delightful treat that added sweetness to their meals. Also known as sugar canes, Berev stepped back a few steps, watching the three of them happily discussing. "My goodness," he muttered, touching the divine punishment stone on his chest. "His Highness is truly possessed by a devil." He had suspected this before, but now he was almost certain. The person he had just talked to could not have been the fourth prince. Berev's mind raced as he considered the drastic changes and unconventional actions of His Highness. The sudden acquisition of new knowledge and the ability to lead people out of their predicaments seemed contrary to his understanding of demons. In myths and legends, demons were typically associated with malevolence and corruptive intentions. However, the prince's actions challenged Berev's preconceived notions. As Barav read through the prince's other proposed reforms, such as recruiting commoners into the city hall and providing education for all citizens, a shiver ran down his spine. He couldn't help but wonder what the border town would become if these reforms were successfully implemented. Barav took a deep breath, clutching the god's punishment stone in his hand. There was one lingering question: could demons possess benevolence as well? If anyone dares to say Roland is evil, Barav will be the first one to disagree. The actions of the fourth prince could be considered as those of a wise and compassionate ruler. In his eyes, he had surpassed even the legendary kings recorded in history by showing genuine concern for the well-being of every citizen. He chose to stay alongside his subjects in Border Town, investing a significant amount of resources to purchase food and ensure the safety of everyone during the treacherous month of the demons. Furthermore, he introduced advanced technologies and machinery, even the which, what people referred a minion of the devil, utilized their abilities to improve the lives of the people. At that moment, Barav realized that even if Roland were to become the ruler of Grey Castle, it might not be such a terrible outcome after all. According to Shane's report, it seems that the church's pills are also circulating in Green Waterport. Although Roland is unsure why the church is simultaneously supporting Garcia and himself, he realizes that he must quickly produce the latest weapons. Suddenly, Anna appeared by Roland's side, startling him. She gently closed the door and walked to Roland's desk, holding a book with golden edges in her arms. She wanted to inquire about the quantum science that Roland mentioned. Roland couldn't help but feel both amused and frustrated, as the realm of microscopic quantum was already a mysterious and complex subject. If he had known, he wouldn't have included that part in his discussion. While thinking about this in his mind, he provided a rough explanation to Anna. She pursed her lips, seemingly dissatisfied with Roland's explanation, but quickly moved on to ask another question. By the time she stopped pressing for answers, Roland had talked himself dry. He underestimated Anna's thirst for knowledge, and at this rate, he wouldn't have much left to teach her. Especially when Roland inquired about her progress in mathematics, she answered with ease, saying it was too simple. Roland suddenly felt the vast difference between individuals. How long had it been? In just 1 week, she had progressed from elementary functions to matrix equations, and next would be calculus. Roland gazed at the woman, who was engrossed in flipping through the book and found himself lost in thought. Her delicate bangs rested on her forehead, with a few strands of hair naturally falling on her cheeks. He couldn't help but extend his index finger, tucking the strands behind her ear. She turned her head to look at Roland, almost as if her eyes filled with a smile. The serene blue pupils were no longer still like water but had rippled with waves. They gazed at each other in such close proximity until Anna mouthed a sentence without making any sound, and Roland still managed to decipher her lip reading. Nightingale isn't here. It was obvious as it could be. Roland felt foolish if he pretended not to understand. The room was silent, and he could almost hear the other person's breath and heartbeat. As he drew closer, Anna closed her eyes, and a blush appeared on her cheeks. Roland smelled the faint fragrance emanating from her body and gently kissed her lips. The sensation of softness transferred through the touch, and time seemed to freeze at that moment. They remained locked in the kiss for an unknown duration before parting. After the establishment of the agriculture department, the spring planting of the new year finally began. This marked Roland's first step in exploring farming techniques. The serfs saw the dawn of becoming free citizens and worked with great enthusiasm. There were no overseers cracking whips to urge them on. The officials of the city hall stated that the Lord did not care about the harvest of 1 or 2 fields. The serfs were now working for themselves, and those who worked harder would reap more. Although these serfs were illiterate, Roland still insisted on lining the riverbank with flags and banners, displaying messages such as, "Labor is the only way to wealth, labor leads to freedom," and "Labor changes life." He also required the serfs to repeat these messages. He never believed that serfs were foolish and irredeemable individuals. Just because they lacked education didn't mean they lacked thoughts and ideas. He knew that by giving them hope of becoming free citizens when they exchanged their bountiful crops for money, bought fine clothes, exquisite food, and even their own land and houses, those slogans would no longer be mere slogans. By relying on their own hands to escape poverty, they could become valued members of border town, and perhaps even surpass a native of the town. As Roland didn't have time to study how to turn sand into glass, he could only burn the crystal bottles that the nobles considered precious and reshape them into what he needed. Nightingale couldn't understand Roland and Anna's conversation about chemistry and acidity, so she walked back to the center of the courtyard, took off her gloves, and picked up a piece of pastry from the round table. The table was filled with palace snacks specially made by the chefs for His Royal Highness. For example, there was a snack called baozi, made from wheat flour with a soft and chewy texture. Inside, there was a filling of finely chopped meat, which contained savory juices. Nightingale sucked on her fingers one by one, leaned back on the lounge chair, and slight drowsiness washed over her. The afternoon sunlight bathed her body, enveloping her in gentle warmth. The rustling sound of the spring breeze caressing the leaves brought a sense of tranquility to her heart. She took off her shoes, curled up her legs, and lay on her side. Nightingale shifted her head and looked at Anna. Anna was holding a newly crafted flat-bottomed cup and seemed to be engaged in a serious and focused conversation with His Royal Highness. Nightingale admired this woman who came from a commoner family yet possessed extraordinary talent. If His Royal Highness were to marry a witch, Anna would be the only candidate Nightingale could think of. Although she harbored a trace of expectation in her heart, Nightingale chose to bury it deeply. Most of the time, just being by His Royal Highness's side was enough to satisfy her. She closed her eyes, and an image involuntarily appeared in her mind. Roland was crowned as the king in the grand hall of the palace. He wore a golden crown and held a jeweled scepter as he walked towards the terrace of the castle, receiving the admiration and cheers of the people. By his side, walking hand in hand, was a woman dressed in a long white silk gown, Anna herself. She also wore a sparkling golden headdress, her face covered by a veil, smiling and waving to the people. Lightning twirled in the sky, showering crimson rose petals, while the distant clock tower of the capital city chimed melodiously. Nightingale and the other sisters stood on the side, applauding and offering their blessings. Roland turned around, lifted the woman's veil, and leaned down to kiss her lips. The final scene became blurred, and as the veil fell to the ground, Nightingale saw, in a trance, that the woman with closed eyes was herself. She curved her lips into a smile and sank into a dream.